My name's Amanda Gardner, and we're going to talk about Save the Cat, which is one of the best books I've ever read on story, and I hope you enjoy. I'm also including a little micro talk that I like to give on creativity, because creative types, we love being creative, but sometimes it can suck the life out of us. So adding that as a fun little bonus. So who am I? I am the narrative director at the Deep End Games. I wrote Perception, which came out in 2017. It's out on Switch, PC, Xbox, PlayStation, the works. I think it's on Steam sale right now. So I'm a mom of 4. I'm a meditation expert. I talk around the country on meditation. I'm a yoga teacher. I'm an author. And also, I used to be an English teacher. And that's really the bridge between my careers is story, right? So even though you don't associate English teachers transitioning into becoming game developers, a good story is a good story is a good story is a good story, and that has been my currency my whole life. So that's why in this presentation I'm going to be talking about story a lot, not necessarily games, because Save the Cat applies to story with a capital S. Doesn't have to be a game. We'll talk more about that in the next slide, which is, what is Save the Cat? So Save the Cat is a book by Blake Snyder, and it's about screenplays. And so you may initially be like, well, okay, screenplay's not exactly a game, but that's where the story with a capital S comes in. Okay, I've written a screenplay. I've written a book, 6 actually. I've written a couple games. It doesn't matter necessarily. I am talking linear though, so if we want to get into branching narrative, now is not the talk. This is about plotting. So the book is specifically about screenplays, but you can apply it to story. The book's fantastic and such an easy read. Like, you will not be bogged down. It's amazing. Secondly, I use Save the Cat beat sheets as an outline tool. You don't even have to buy Save the Cat to get beat sheets. All you have to do is Google beat sheets, and it comes up. It's a 1-page, 15 beats of how to outline a story. I've done this with 10 books, people. It's awesome. I haven't written 4 of them, but I got the outlines because of Save the Cat. The website is so exciting because it takes movies that are out, and the fans of Save the Cat turn it into beat sheets. So I'm going to be doing one of the beat sheets along with you for a relatively recent movie. And the movie has a sequel that's out, so we all know what happens. We don't have to get upset. Save the Cat is a great jumping off point. Here's the thing. This is a formula, okay? And so you may be looking at it being like, that's really basic for a story. But it gets you where you need to be, and it hits all the major points you need for the story to be rich. This is the skeleton. You add the meat, okay? Or I'm a vegan. This is a tree. You add the branches, okay? It's also a great resource for getting unstuck. If you've already written a story and you're like, this isn't working for some reason, reverse engineer it. Turn it into a beat sheet. See what you're missing. See what's too heavy, what's too light. Like, it's a great resource for that. And finally, if you want to move on to a more advanced level and more nuanced skeleton complete with fascia and cartilage and all that jazz, read Story by Robert McKee. That would be like a 2 or 3 hour talk, and that's not what we're doing today. But it is the most brilliant book on story that I can even fathom, but it's like micro beats, and then the character does this positive thing and then a negative thing. It's like very, very, very nuanced, and it would just take forever to explain. So beat 1, we're jumping right into it. Beat 1 is the opening image. What do we see in the game? What do we see in the movie? What do we see in the story? A lot of times it shows a snapshot of the world or the problem, and the example that I'm going to be using, I found on the Save the Cat website, is somebody documented Infinity War, but they did the beat sheet from Thanos' perspective, which I found fascinating, so I had to put it in today. So you have, in the depths of space, Thanos attacks and boards the Asgardian ship. So opening images, think about like a typical rom-com. You have the woman, and she's sort of like stumbling, and oh no, her heel breaks off, and she drops all her groceries, and somebody comes out and be like, you have to pay the bills, and it's all these things. Blake Snyder talks about all the things that have to be wrong in the opening scene and in the setup so that you know where things are eventually going to go. I think that sounds it's a little bit over the top, but you really do need to paint a picture of what's kind of the problem pretty early on. So the setup expands a little bit more on that. Like I said, the 6 things that are wrong. So you go into what's going on with Thanos, and so he's got one of the stones, and he starts his sort of reasoning behind why, you find out why he needs to get the rest of them. Theme stated, okay. Theme stated. How many of you have seen The Babadook? Okay. In The Babadook, in the grocery store, when the little boy Samuel tells a stranger that his father died the night he was born, and the stranger says, well, isn't your mother lucky to have you? That's theme stated. It's usually a character that is not the main character. It's often a character that's irrelevant or in the periphery. But somebody has to say something that the rest of the movie or the game or the story or the book has to sort of cycle around. And The Babadook is really about grief and this woman's inability to accept her husband, but will she accept her son? Is this grief a barrier of that, right? So that's the theme stated. Isn't your mother so lucky to have you? Well, is she? That's really what it goes into. So theme stated, Thanos, dread it, run from it, destiny arrives all the same. This is a case where the main character does state the theme. Now, you're going to notice a lot of inconsistencies. That's because Save the Cat is for outlining, not the final product, okay? So some of these I give examples and you're like, huh, it doesn't really seem like it. That's okay. That's what story's nuanced. Sometimes people shake things up. It's fine. These are the general things that you need for it to function, roughly. Catalyst. Okay, so this is the moment where it all changes. This is the inciting incident. When I used to be an English teacher, that's what I used to call it, the inciting incident. What makes it all happen? Heimdall sends Hulk to Earth to give Thanos' enemies advance a warning of his arrival, putting his plans in jeopardy. So, things are going to start going awry because the Avengers are on the case. My favorite example of a catalyst is Jack Torrance gets the job. The Shining. He gets the job at the Overlook. That's where shit starts to go down. The debate. Okay, when I used to teach the cycle of the hero, this was one of the big points. The character has to decide whether they're going to do this, right? Harry Potter, Bilbo, Frodo, all of them, right? In the cycle, so if we're looking at this from like a Joseph Campbell monomyth, like how all stories are the same story, the monomyth, that has much fewer working pieces than the 15 beats. The 15 beats are much more clear, but essentially it's somebody starts out in humble beginnings. There's a call to action. You debate the call to action. Then you set off, gain friends, gain skills, and bring home the goods to your people. That's the monomyth, right? I mean, you can apply that to Harry Potter, Jesus, it doesn't matter. You apply that, and it's pretty much, I mean, think about it, right? Like, it kind of fits the monomyth, let's be honest. This is a little bit more nuanced, but they hit in the same place. They have to make the choice to go further. One of my favorite examples of this, and he's not the main character, but Cameron and Ferris Bueller, when he's sitting in the car, I'll go. Oh, he's going to give me such a hard time. You know that scene where he's just sitting there having that debate with himself? I love that. Break into 2. This is where they start on the mission, okay? Thanos sets out to obtain the Reality Stone from the Collector out of nowhere. And this is in It, where the loser club goes to find Georgie, okay? So this is where the action proper really begins. And this is kind of where the fun starts. You know, the exposition is really just sort of starting to get us somewhere, and this is the somewhere, okay? A lot of people say, oh, stories fall apart in the middle. I have 2 slides to go to really get to that, but the middle really should be where you deliver on the goods, right? So I always try to remind myself when I'm writing, like, it's not about having a really fancy exposition and a really tight resolution. It's the majority of the ride. So next comes the B story. And a lot of the time, this is the romance factor, but in reality, it's kind of the heart, an emotional heart, Okay, so if this is not a love story, it's an emotionally resonant side story. And the example I love to give about an emotionally resonant side story is this is where Inigo Montoya tells what happened to his father. Okay, that is a great example of a B story. Okay, so here we've got Thanos meets Gamora as a child. He takes her aside. Yeah, so because this person chose to do this from Thanos' perspective, you do have that love that he has for Gamora. It's the only love he really shows. So even though it's not a B-side love story, it's a B-side love story, right? Also, the B-side love story has to become important in the part of the story where all hope is lost. So it's important to have that emotionally resonant side story, because then when all is lost, you have that sort of gut-punchy gravitas there. The promise of the premise, and this is what I was talking about earlier. Your middle has to be fun. Your middle has to be satisfying. It's Goonies. Okay? Goonies! How much fun is Goonies? Take a bunch of weird kids and stick them in a crazy situation underground where they're trying to fight to save their houses with pirate treasure and crazy mobsters. That's Goonies. It's not the beginning, it's the fun middle. It's the wacky, wild, fun middle. So I like to give Goonies as an example of the promise of the premise. So when you're sort of pitching your game, even if it's just to a friend or pitching your novel, this is the stuff. This is what it's really about, right? It's not the setup. Too many people, I have so many friends who are in games and in books and etc. And when they're telling me what they're writing about, they're giving me the exposition. And then this happens, and so then that happens. I was like, no. Give me the promise of the premise. Like, give me what you're delivering. And then they get real excited. And it makes you realize, like, that's why bad stories have sagging middles. The sagging middle is really where you want to get to the fun. Or the scary. I mean, I write horror. So like by fun, I mean like terrifying stuff, okay? The midpoint. Okay, so I slightly disagree with how Blake Snyder describes it. So here he says, it's the moment where everything is great or everything's awful. I am going to most times say it's the time where everything's great, because this is supposed to be the opposite of the dark night of the soul. But if things are great, it has to be a false win, okay? So, and that's where Snyder and I kind of agree. So 28 days later, the most memorable scene for me is the grocery store. Does anybody remember what I'm talking about? They walk into the grocery store and the food's all there. It hasn't been raided. And these people who have been running from terrifying zombies, who have had to scrounge, they have this big, bright grocery store full of bright green apples, and just, it lets the air out of the tires. It gives the people watching a little bit to breathe. It gives you a little bit of hope. Oh my God, things are gonna be okay. And then of course, as soon as the scene's over, everything goes to shit, right? But it gives you that hope, but it's not a real hope. I love the midpoint. I think the midpoint can be a really, really, really great scene. And so in this example, you have the Gamora telling him, I really should have worn my glasses, I'm so sorry. Fonts are important, and I guess I didn't really look at the size that well today. So time clock, this is super important. So Gamora tells where the Soul Stone's location is. If the midpoint is where time has to start ticking down. And this can be really in any story. It can be in a love story, it can be in horror, and it could be, but there has to be stakes raised and a clock ticking for there to be real momentum toward the end, okay? So this is where the clock starts ticking. Thanos has to get the stones before his enemies destroy them. So before it was, of course he wanted to get them. Now it's like, oh, no, they're on to all of them. You need to get them first or get them out of their hands. So clock is now ticking because we have reached the midpoint. Okay, bad guys close in. things start to go downhill from the midpoint. That's why I say I don't like the midpoint being a negative, because things just keep getting more and more negative, right? So bad guys close in. It's not, it's a mini boss, okay? Like we are at, it's a little nasty, it's a little scary, but our heroes have gained skills and our heroes have gained companions. So they're scrapping it. It's not that bad. But it starts to destroy morale. And that's much more dangerous than really anything. Because if you start to lose faith, then things get really bleak. And that's why next is going to be All Is Lost and then Dark Night of the Soul. So this is where, when your trust starts to erode and when things start to go bad, that is where we start to go down. So, okay, so this is where Thanos sacrifices Gamora. So I would say that this is probably more suited to a Dark Night of the Soul, but because this movie, it's about Thanos, but it's really not Thanos. Like I said, the bones are a little in different places, but like I said, that's okay. So, right, he explains that the hardest choices require the strongest will, and then he's ambushed, right? This is where the Avengers start to get the best of him, right? Things start to go poorly for Thanos at this point. He makes the ultimate sacrifice and is not quite rewarded. Now, so this is the opposite of the midpoint, okay? All is lost. Everything they've gained is gone. Everything they've learned has no meaning, okay? This is what you would think is rock bottom. It's not. It's what they think is rock bottom. And then it gets worse. Someone or something usually dies, or there's something that Blake Snyder calls the whiff of death. And that means that the character you love, the main character, has a brush with death, or you feel the stink of death in the air. Like it's like we think this is the worst, but it's actually going to get a lot worse. So here, Thanos begins to mourn because he realizes that Gamora's sacrifice was possibly all for naught, because they're starting to, they stole the gauntlet and they're starting to get the best of him. Dark Night of the Soul. Okay. This is the real rock bottom. Like before we had the fake rock bottom when they were like, oh, it can't get any worse than this. Well, JK, it just got so much worse. So the main character loses, but you have to fall before you can pick yourself back up and try again. So in this, Thanos, so this is another one, I don't love the example, so we're gonna go back to Babadook. What was the theme again? Aren't you lucky? Isn't your mother lucky to have you? And is grief blocking her love of you? She has to move on, right? The Dark Night of the Soul in the Babadook takes place she's watching the TV. She sees a mother has stabbed her child to death, and yet she's watching the TV and sees herself, and she starts to be like, oh my God, did I just kill my child? What's going on? She goes into the basement and sees her husband and thinks everything's okay. And then things just go to hell. He's a monster, and she sort of devolves. But really what it is it's tying back to that theme. Aren't you so lucky to have your son? Well, you think you just killed him, right? And your grief over your husband is getting in the way of you loving your son. So her rock bottom was nearly killing her son. Oh, in that moment, when she's like strangling him and he strokes her hair, like that gutted me. If you haven't seen the Babadook, you guys, oh my God. Oh my God. As a mom, like I cannot with that movie. This is another great place to point out cycles of heroes. So before I talked about the cycle of the fantasy hero, the monomyth, the Joseph Campbell. Here's where I would like to do like a little mini English talk on the cycle of the tragic hero, which falls in line perfectly with Dark Night of the Soul. Because tragic hero, as opposed to the fantasy hero who comes from humble beginnings, the tragic hero has to be riding high on the wheel of fortune. He has to be doing great. okay? So he's riding high. Hamartia is your tragic flaw. Hamartia, okay? Tragic flaw of the nose. No, so they have to have a tragic flaw that causes their downfall. They can't just have a tragic flaw and have like a downfall that's unrelated. Their tragic flaw has to be based on that. Is it pride, hubris, you know? Is it that they're too trusting, okay? And then there's peripetia, where the reversal of fortune points at something called the ananeurosis, which is the moment they realize it's all their fault. If you think about all tragedies, they have this awful, gut-wrenching moment where they're like, this is of my doing. And that is dark night of the soul shit right there. This is awful and it's my fault. In fact, so the English teacher in me went and saw Hamilton, which is amazing, right? So I'm at the part after Burr has shot Hamilton and realizes that all of this really was his doing, that I realized I think Aaron Burr might be the hero of Hamilton. Right? Right? Oh my God, riding high on the wheel of fortune, has this tragic flaw. The tragic flaw causes his downfall, realizes that this is all his fault. It's not Hamilton's story, it's Aaron Burr, oh my God. So, sorry, little tangent. And then the audience feels this catharsis, right? After the dark night of the soul, after the story's resolved, whether it goes well or does not go well, we as the audience have a catharsis. So the dark night of the soul is really, really, really critical, but what makes it the most emotionally resonant if it is connected to that theme, okay? If we have a strong connection between the theme stated and the dark night of the soul, that's where the power in your story really can happen. So when you're writing it, make sure that theme stated is strong enough that you have a real gut punch of a dark night of the soul. Break into 3. So this is the third act. Third acts typically go pretty quickly. A new idea, fresh inspiration, plot device, Deus Ex Machina, who knows? But oftentimes it's the B story that swoops in and saves the day and comes into this last push. Okay, we're gonna make it, we're gonna be fine. So now Thanos has all the stones, walks into Wakanda, into victory. Break into 3 can be a little boring. I like to find ways to spice it up and add little twists after Dark Night of the Soul and before the final image, because I feel like third acts can be kind of predictable, but that's just me. Okay, so finales are interesting because Blake Snyder posits that finales have 5 parts. Gather the team, execute the plan, you get a high tower surprise, which is like a little bit of a twist. Dig deep down, like gotta scrap for that last bit of the win, and then execute a new plan. Because think about it, has anybody really ever won with the plan they went in with? Think about it. There's always a plan B, how do we do this? And that's the one that works, right? So that's why having a plan B, C, D, E, F, G are really great. So yeah, Act 3 is about synthesis. Act 3 is about things coming together. All of the breadcrumbs that you have sort of put out all come to fruition in Act 3. So you really want Act 3 to tie things together neatly. But you know, you can still have some fun with it. So here is where Thanos snaps his fingers. I hated this movie. I'm not gonna lie, I left there going, fuck Marvel. I was so mad that he won. And my husband's like, honey, there's part 2 and it comes out next year. And I was like, I don't care. They can't have him win. And it really genuinely like upset me. But I thought that was kind of great, like after the fact, like, oh, I'll get everybody back. Spider-Man's not dead. He's not. He's not. And so the final image, really ought to be the opposite of the opening image. Blake Snyder talks a lot about how it's really nice to have parallel images. So, you know, if we go back to that sort of jokey bit about the rom-com being like, oh, I fell and broke my heel and spilled coffee on myself and fell in dog doo and all my bills are due. The opposite, the final image should be like the woman waking up and like going to work and like everything's great and people are saying hi and she arrives unscathed. Like it needs to be sort of like an opposite. Opposites work well. When I wrote Perception, the opening image is Cassie going up to the door of this haunted mansion, and the final image of the game is she's a sculptor. The final image of the game is that she sculpted the mansion, and you're looking at her sculpture of it. So it's got that little parallel. A really beautiful example of this final image is Nightmare Before Christmas. If anybody can remember, it's Jack Skellington, and he's got his little dog, and he's got the girl, and they're standing on the ridge. And if you notice, it's covered in snow and pumpkins. And it really is a perfect fitting final image for the movie because he knows he's not meant to do the Christmas thing. Like he's the Halloween guy and he's good at it, but he's learned so much and he's broadened his horizons. But it still has that beautiful faint glitter of snow on top of the pumpkins in the field. And opening images and ending images are nicely symbolic. And I think that does a good one. Thanos, when he's sitting there smiling, smug asshole. Ugh, the worst. Thanos is the worst. So this next slide always makes me smile. Okay, similarity is wonderful. These are sloths and pain au chocolat. They look so much alike, but they're different in wonderful ways, okay? Similarity is not bad. They're such cute little animals and such delicious pastries, and that's fine, okay? That's fine. And my point here is that, I don't want you to be afraid to use the beat sheets. We as creators have this fear of like, oh, what if I look like I'm doing something like that last person did? What if I look like I'm ripping them off? All stories have been told. I mean, look at the monomyth, hello. All stories have been told, but it's what you bring to it. It's the muscles that you add to it. It's the hair and the cartilage and the fascia. It is not the bones, okay? So don't be afraid to use this. Okay, just because it's a formula does not mean you're unoriginal. Just because you have an opening scene that parallels a final scene, people aren't gonna be like, that's just like Nightmare Before Christmas. No. Like, it's okay, it's okay. It doesn't mean you're a noob either, that you're using a book to help you structure a story. It's just gonna be a more easy to understand story. Like, it's not like you're reading something being like, this is so trite and derivative. Like, no, it's good bones, okay? And it also doesn't mean if you already wrote a story and it doesn't fit this, that it's bad. Stories come in all shapes or forms. This is just a really digestible, easy one to use. Doesn't matter if you're beginning, doesn't matter if you've written 10 books. Like I think I discovered Save the Cat 2 books deep, I'm trying to remember, but it doesn't matter. It helps all stories. It does. It helps your stories. And you can even just use it as a reference, like I said. Look at your own story, be like, okay, there are some gaps, that's fine. Similarity is wonderful. Using other things to compare is wonderful. If this interested you, I highly recommend going to the Save the Cat website, seeing if they have any beat sheets for your favorite movies, and watching your favorite movies with a beat sheet next to you and be like, oh my God, that's right. It goes right through it. It's so fun to actually be like, oh my God, I just did it for Gremlins. Amazing. Gremlins is a really easy one to beat sheet out because if you think about that scene where he's trying to buy the mogwai in the shop and the old man says like, no, you need to be responsible for things. That is a perfect example of theme stated, right? He's not an important character in the rest of the story, but he's telling you what you need to know. This story is about taking responsibility for your little fuzzy monsters, okay? Seriously. So go to the website, find a great movie that's got a beat sheet, watch it. It's a delight. Predator, they have ones for Predator, which is so fun to watch along with the beat sheet. Or conversely, print out a beat sheet, pick your favorite movie, and see if you can do it. It's great exercise for your mind. It's a really fun way to revisit work that you love. And I really enjoy doing it just for funsies, because I'm that kind of nerd. So that's the part on Save the Cat. I'm going to go into the little mini talk on creativity, and then I'll have a little time for questions, but I'm a super fast talker because I taught for so long that I just get everything in a lecture out really fast. So if we get out a little bit early, hey, you can have dinner early or chill, so. Okay, so I love plot bunnies. And if you don't know what a plot bunny is, it's when you're working on a project and this other little story doesn't stop bothering you, right? So this is gonna be a little bit about the proper care and handling of plot bunnies. So what is a plot bunny? Like I said, it just drives you bananas, and you have to write it down, okay? So I'm encouraging you to have a journal where you only put plot bunnies. You can buy a journal with a bunny on it, just to remind you of that. You can just buy an attractive journal, or you can use Evernote or something, but keep track of every little idea you have because you never know when it's gonna be your B story. You never know when it's gonna be like some ancillary character's backstory. Hang on to every plot bunny you can get your hands on, but be careful, they breed. So get a notebook, Evernote, even just your notes app on your phone, folder in Google Drive. Write it all down, because you think you're gonna remember. Let me tell you, I can't tell you how many game ideas that I talked about with my husband, and we were like, that's so cool, that the next day we're like, what? And we forget them. Write everything down. And there's actually more reasoning behind why I want you to write everything down. We are going to be talking about how to use your subconscious as well to be an endless fountain of creativity. So read what you wrote before bed. If you have a plot bunny journal, keep it next to your bed. Use it also as a dream journal, which is going to be the next page. But before you go to bed, if you have a plot problem in something that you're writing, if you have a mechanic problem, if you have even like a musical issue that you like, I just can't break through with this, right before you fall asleep, that's what you should be thinking about. I'm telling you, your brain goes into this problem-solving mode subconsciously, and you may very well have the answer in the next morning. It's happened to me countless times, but you have to be systematic about it because you could lose it. So let's talk about dream journals as creative tools. So dreams allow you to process your day's thoughts. Whether you realize it or not, you're hashing through the things that you went through in your day. Your brain's trying to make sense of it. It's trying to compartmentalize it. And even though things can be irrelevant in your dreams, they can actually be very important because your dreams allow you to air out these repressed issues that your happy thinking brain doesn't want you thinking about. Okay, so that's why sometimes you have dreams that give you wretched anxiety because you're like, oh, I haven't let myself think about that yet. Thanks. Heavy symbolism, pay attention. Okay, so I may be extra good at symbolism because I'm an English teacher who reads tarot cards, but you can all do it, okay? Basically, if there's something in your dream that stands out as unusual, grab yourself a dream journal or Google what it means. I had a friend who was trying to get pregnant, and she saw a turkey in her dream. She was telling me how weird it was because like it wasn't fall, and it wasn't like near Thanksgiving where she was like, turkey. Like it was like a turkey. And she looked it up, and it meant fertility. Like shit's meaningful. Okay? You can learn to be symbolic if you think about what is behind the meaning of every object or every act. So if you have a dream about a hammer and you think that's irrelevant, turn on your, everybody's got an inner English teacher. Turn on your inner English teacher and be like, okay, a hammer. A hammer can be used to create and destroy. Ooh, what does that mean? You know, like, oh, I had a dream and all of the children were made of gold. Okay, well, what does gold typically represent? It usually means perfect. Does that mean I think that everybody's got perfect children and mine aren't? Go there, okay? Allow yourself to get symbolic with things or just start reading tarot cards. Think about your dreams and what was cool about it. Something cool in your dreams could make a really cool story or mechanic or side plot or B story. Jot it all down. If we all wrote down all of the great things that our dreams give us, we would all be millionaires in here because so many times you get this little nugget. Maybe it's just a little mechanic, just a little set piece in your story. It could make it amazing. Were there things that stuck with you? Have you ever had a dream that even like that afternoon you're thinking about something? Write it down, write it down, write it down. And also be an opportunist. How can I use this? Okay, a lot of times we need to give ourselves more credit. Like, I thought of something interesting. Like, what can I do with that? I'm gonna file that away in my notebook so you have one place where it all is. And lastly, like I said in the last slide, allow your subconscious to do the work for you, okay? Read the dreams from last night. Read any story issues you have right now with what you're currently working on. Read your list of plot bunnies. They may multiply in ways you never expected. Another way that I like to sort of get creative when I'm feeling a little bit like, oh, I feel like I'm out of stories, or I feel like I'm out of characters, I feel like I'm recycling shit, is I think about what I like personally and why I like it. Think about it. We all have genres we gravitate toward. We all have things that we're just naturally interested in, but how often do we wonder why are we interested in that at all? So for me, my favorite topics, I love pandemics. If a story has a pandemic, take my money. Reincarnation, big, big, big for me. Lost love, separated through space, time, etc., and post-apocalyptic survival. So what I would do when I'm feeling sort of tapped is I would think about these, think about why I like them, think about some examples of it that I think work really well, and sometimes I even think of ways to combine them. Lost love spread across the pandemic. How are they going to get back together? Post-apocalyptic reincarnation. I did not want to come back to such an awful timeline, etc. So sort of journal it out. Journal out what your favorite genres are, favorite stories, and just start doing some thinking. And do it when? Before bed, because you may have an awesome idea overnight. All right. La-di-da, it's not moving along. I do have more slides. Thank you very much. Where are they? It says, oh no. Sorry guys, my computer doesn't like me today. Wow. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, so this is the slide where I talk about the weird method I used to write my last book. And it was so weird that my agent is like calling me every day being like, so can you tell me more about how you did that? Because it was wild. So, I've loved fantasy my whole life, but I've never had the balls to write it. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna write fantasy. How the hell am I gonna do this? So what I did was I made a playlist of songs that captured feelings I wanted to feel during this book. I wanna feel like I can do magic. I wanna feel like I'm gonna punch someone in the face. I feel like I want to make out. I put all of these songs in that makes me feel all the feelings. And then I hopped on a treadmill for an hour and just listened to the music, got it all out, and let myself fantasize about this book while I listened to the music. It shook up my body physically. It shook up my neural pathways because I was listening to music but thinking about a book and also on a freaking elliptical. And the moment I got off that elliptical, I brought my laptop to the gym every day. I would sit down and I would write 2,000 words, whether they were garbage or not. And in 60 days, I had a fantasy novel. I did it every day for 60 days. Lost some weight too. But I told my agent about it and she was amazed, but I was like, listen, it literally takes what's in your brain and shakes it up. You're physically moving, you're sweating, you're listening to music, you're fantasizing. There's all sorts of things happening there. And I truly believe that our brains are very snow globe-like with our creativity, and all you need to do is mix it up. So, like I said, throw together songs, go for a walk. You don't have to get on an elliptical or a bike. I also think that doing different types of art is very helpful for your creativity. If you are a writer, I would suggest painting something, even if you think it's garbage. It's using a different part of your brain. If you are a musician, paint or write a poem. I mean, you don't want to hear me coming up with songs, but like, hey, you know, it's mixing it up. Get creative in a way that you're not used to. Play with clay. Play with Play-Doh. Do something that really gets your creative pathways going in different directions. They say one of the keys to being sharp and intelligent your whole life is taking different roads to places you already know. And it's the new neural pathways thing. Like if you tread over that same street over and over again, your brain goes into autopilot and you get stupider. I'm serious. I've done a lot of reading on this shit. It's weird. So try new things, go different paths. Brush your teeth with your non-dominant hand and the world is a different place. I'm dead serious. Do it. Like, write that down. You're going to be like, wow, new colors. What is going on? Just everything feels different. Flex your creative muscles every day. I put that picture there because I say you should write fan fiction. Everybody should write fan fiction. And I'll explain why. I love that picture. Okay, so make up stories about strangers. Be nice, of course. But so my sister and I, we used to have a 1-hour commute to our really crappy, we used to waitress at this awful restaurant. And a lot of times we would be stuck in traffic and had nothing to do, and we would look in the cars around us, and we would just make up stories about the people around us. It flexed our creative muscles, we had a good laugh, and it kept things fresh for us creatively. Make up alternative endings to movies, TV shows, Game of Thrones, oh my God, games, and write them down. Write fan fiction. Fan fiction's amazing because you have a set group of characters in a set group of world, and the story goes like this. But ask yourself one question, and that question is going to be the most important a creative person ever asks, and it's what if? What if Game of Thrones ended properly? What if Lost made sense? I'm not bitter. No, but fan fiction is a really easy way to jump into writing because it's like clothing that's already been broken in. You know, like you can sort of. I wrote fan fiction for years. It's fun. And it flexes your creative muscles. It makes you ask, what if? You imagine alternate realities. And it's another great way to flex those creative muscles. Oh, it's not moving along yet. Oh my God. Okay, so showering. I love this. Listen to this. There is a researcher named Jonah Lehrer, and he says this: when our minds are at ease, when those alpha waves are rippling through the brain, we're more likely to direct the spotlight of attention inward toward the stream of remote associations emanating from the right hemisphere. In contrast, when we're diligently focused, our attention tends to be directed outward toward details of the problems we're trying to solve. It's not until we're being massaged by warm water, unable to check our email, that we're finally able to hear the quiet voices in the backs of our heads telling us about the insight. The answers have been there along, we just weren't listening. When they start with devices that you can take into the shower, we are fucked. Shower. How many of you have had a great idea in the shower? Or the tub? It's a real thing. And so there's this neuroscientist, Alice Fletcher, says that it's these few things. Dopamine. So when you're in the shower, you get those happy, juicy chemicals coming out, right? It's paired with an incubation period. You're in there for a certain amount of time. A shower doesn't take 30 seconds unless you're me with 4 kids who's like, oh my God, all right, I'm coming. Just give me 10 more seconds, right? There's no distraction. How many of you read the goddamn shampoo bottle, right? Oh, wow, I didn't even know aloe vera could do that. Like, you've got nothing to do in there. You have nothing to do in there. You have no distractions, okay? The subconscious mind has been working extremely hard to solve the problems you face, and now that you let your mind wander, it can surface and plant those ideas in your conscious mind. If you've ever been wondering why you get good ideas in the shower, it's because of these reasons, okay? Bring your journal into the bathroom. I'm serious. Okay, brainstorm early. Some people might not want to hear this. Okay, so when you wake up, that is when your prefrontal cortex is the most active, and that's the part of the brain that makes us the most human. It's the most new part of the brain. It is the really, really creative and freaky part of the brain. Another reason you should brainstorm early. This is going to disappoint you. We have a finite amount of willpower. Researchers have shown that our willpower is finite and diminishes by the end of the day, which is why most people cheat on diets and spouses after work. It's not because that's when it's convenient. It's because that's when you are tapped and most likely to make a poor choice. The researchers found this out by doing a study with impossible math problems and plates of warm chocolate chip cookies. How cruel is that? Cruel, I tell you. But it came up with some really fascinating facts. And the reason, do you ever notice Steve Jobs, when he was alive, only had one thing that he ever wore? He wore the black turtleneck and the black pants. It was because it took a choice off his plate. He knew that we had finite amount of willpower to make choices, finite amount of bandwidth. So he said, you know what, fuck it, I'm never picking out my clothes. I'm wearing this black turtle, like the same set of black turtlenecks and black pants every day. Took it straight off his plate. Barack Obama did the same thing in a way. He never dressed himself. He just said, just bring it in and I'll wear it. He didn't want to have to deal with that choice. So if we can do things in our day that automate our day, like I have the same goddamn smoothie every morning, it's got everything I need and I don't have to think about it. It's right there, I make it. I don't have to be like, should I have eggs or toast or that? Like I got 4 kids, like I said, like I don't need more decisions in my life. If you can take some decisions off your plate, you have more bandwidth for being creative. And that's why I say brainstorm and be creative early when you still have all that willpower up there. Also, the things that have marinated in your sleep will still be fresh. You have the most energy, theoretically. That being said, there are people who scientists call larks versus owls. So sometimes there are people who just do better at night. And if you know you're an owl, that's fine. Just make sure you develop habits that support your creativity rather than detract from it. And the point of this little mini talk was notice things, reflect on them, write them down, and repeat. That is the key. That is the key to keeping an endless fount of creativity is notice everything, think about everything, write about everything, and just keep doing it. So that was my little mini talk. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I just threw it in, a little spice. So that's me. The pen is mightier. Oh, thank you. Stay in touch. Stay in touch. I love to chat with people. I love engaging on Twitter and whatnot. If you have questions, go for it. And also, in case you missed it earlier, that screenplay book that was much more detailed is Story by Robert McKee. Story, Robert McKee is M-C-K-E-E. And that's the other one. And do we have any questions? I meditate so often on what I'm writing that, okay, so you know how I said before you go to sleep, ask yourself a bunch of questions? That's what I do before I meditate. So I will be like, okay, I need to solve this, 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 and this. And then I meditate and clear my mind, and I don't think about the problems, but if the solutions come to me, that's great. Sometimes I get solutions for things that I don't need I don't need yet, but I'll just write it down anyway. Yes, I meditate heavily. I'm heavily meditated. And it helps with my creativity. There's something called yoga nidra, N-I-D-R-A, and it's not yoga as in like you wrap your leg around your head. It's a yogic sleep, and it puts you in a trance-like state where you get the equivalent of 4 hours sleep when you do it, and it's 20 minutes long. Yoga nidra, everybody look it up on YouTube. It's incredible. But anyway, I do a lot of yoga nidra when I'm traveling to keep the creativity and energy up. Also, it's super trippy. Like you get some really cool ideas just doing it in general. But yes, good question. I like that. I only have written a linear game. I did not have branching storylines. I know that eventually I'm going to write a day. There's going to be a day where I write something with branching storylines. It just hasn't happened yet. I'm a very linear person. Stephen, like in terms of being a plotter or a pantser, writers are either plotters where they write everything out or pantsers. They fly by the seat of their pants. Stephen King has never plotted a single book. He says he sets up the characters with an interesting situation and watches what they do. That gives me heart palpitations and hives. I can't imagine doing that, but it works for him. So I feel like he would be really, really great at the branching thing. I'm very linear. It's probably going to take me some time. So I'm not the right person to ask. I'm sure there are many other talented people who are at this conference to ask about branching storylines. It's music I know really well because it's music that I want to feel that feeling. Like when there's a song and you're just like, oh my God, this makes me so sad. I want that as my Dark Night of the Soul music. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes I'll find an artist that I think is really incredible and put the artist into my playlist. And sometimes it's a really good fit. Like for my most recent book, my husband actually discovered Meg Myers. And I didn't know all her music, but I put all her music in. And it made my protagonist so ferocious and passionate and amazing. And yeah, so yes and no. Usually it's something I'm familiar with, but I sometimes throw in a little bit that I'm not as familiar with, so yeah. Not a thing. I'm so sorry. So funny story. I can't tell you a thing. And my 8-year-old was in the car being driven home by his friend's parents the other day, and they said, so what are your parents working on now? Riley goes, I cannot say anything about the next game. Please don't ask. I was like, I guess I've trained him really well. I don't know. Like, I would love to be able to tell you. And when I can, I'll be so excited, but I can't. Sorry. I feel like specific plot points shift around, but never really the main point of what's supposed to be happening. Do you know what I mean? Like, if I've got the debate, I really can't have that much later than the first 50 pages, if we're talking about a book. I feel like if you move really critical pieces around, then you're gonna have a problem. But if you move a plot element elsewhere, it's fine, yeah. Any others? Go forth and create. Have a good one, thank you.